It all began on an ordinary afternoon, in the place where I thought I could always feel safe, school. I never imagined that a single moment inside the locker room would change the way I looked at friendship, trust, and even myself. For years, I had called her my best friend. She knew my secrets, my fears, the way I laughed at the smallest things, and the way I stayed quiet when I was hurting. To me, she wasn't just another classmate. She was home, but that day, under the harsh fluorescent lights and the sound of lockers slamming shut, she crossed a line that would shake my world. What she did wasn't just unexpected, it left me questioning everything I believed about love, about friendship, and about what it means to truly be seen. That I wasn't prepared for the way her touch lingered, or how her eyes carried a truth I had been too scared to face. And in that silence, between the sound of our breathing and the distant echoes of laughter outside, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the people we trust most hold the keys to the parts of ourselves we've been hiding the longest. This isn't just a story about what happened in that locker room. It's a story about discovering love in the most complicated place, about betrayal and healing, and about the courage it takes to embrace who we really are, even when it hurts. And it all started with my best friend, and the moment I never saw coming. I never thought much about how friendships could blur the lines between comfort and confusion until the day everything shifted. For years, my best friend had been the closest person in my life. We met when we were just kids, drawn together by something unspoken, the kind of connection that doesn't need explanation. She was the one who sat with me during lunch when I had no one, the one who walked home with me even when it made her late. Our bond was strong, or at least I believed it was. I trusted her in ways I didn't trust anyone else. I told her about the fights at home, about the way I felt different but couldn't explain why, about the nights I lay awake wondering if I would ever be enough for anyone. She listened without judgment, always with that smile that made me feel like I wasn't invisible. That's why the locker room moment cut so deep. It wasn't just about what happened, it was about who it was with. That day had started like any other. Classes dragged on, and the air was thick with the smell of sweat and chalk in the gym. The noise of sneakers squeaking on the floor, coaches shouting, and girls laughing filled the space. I was tired but relieved when practice ended. The locker room was always noisy at first, filled with the clatter of doors, the rush of showers, and the chatter of teammates. But slowly, it emptied, and I noticed how quiet it became when it was just the two of us left behind. I had grown so used to those moments with her. Sometimes we stayed longer than necessary, just talking about life while tying our shoelaces or brushing out our hair. It was our little bubble, away from the noise of the world. That afternoon, the air in that room felt heavier, charged in a way I couldn't name. That I remember sitting on the bench, tying my sneakers slowly, while she leaned against the locker door watching me. Her gaze felt different. Not playful, not casual, but intense, like she was seeing something in me that I had spent years trying to hide. I tried to brush it off, laughing about how exhausted I was, but she didn't laugh back. Instead, she came closer. I could feel the warmth of her body next to mine, and my heart began to race in a way that scared me. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from my face. It was such a small gesture, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. There was no one else around, no noise to distract me, only the sound of my own pulse thundering in my ears. That I should have felt safe, because this was my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone. But it didn't feel safe. It felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing the ground could give way at any second. She leaned in, her voice low, and whispered something I will never forget. I've wanted to tell you this for so long. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but the answer came in the way she touched my hand. Her fingers lingered, soft but firm, and the meaning was clear. She wasn't just my best friend anymore, at least, not in her eyes. That I wish I could say I knew what to do in that moment. I wish I could say I pulled away or leaned in or gave her an answer. But the truth is, I sat there, frozen in a storm of emotions I had never allowed myself to feel. A part of me felt betrayed, as if she had broken the unspoken rule of friendship we had built for years. Another part of me, the part buried deep, felt something I couldn't admit, not to her, not to myself. It was fear mixed with longing, confusion tangled with desire, and I hated myself for feeling it. Because if I admitted that her touch stirred something in me, then I had to admit what I had been running from all along. The silence stretched on, heavy and unbearable. She searched my face for an answer, but I couldn't give her one. My hands trembled as I pulled them away and stood up, pretending to busy myself with my bag. I told her we should get going, that people would wonder why we were taking so long. My voice cracked, betraying me. She didn't push, but I could feel her eyes on me, filled with something unspoken, something I wasn't ready to face. When we finally walked out of the locker room, side by side but miles apart, everything felt different. The air was colder, the world sharper. Nothing had changed on the outside, but inside, I knew nothing would ever be the same. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the moment over and over. The way she looked at me, the way my heart betrayed me, the way silence held more meaning than words ever could. I wanted to hate her for crossing that line, but I couldn't. Because part of me had been waiting for it too, even if I never admitted it. That realization tore me apart. I was angry at her, at myself, at the world for making me feel like something so natural had to be so wrong. And as much as I tried to bury it, I knew the story had only just begun. This was no longer just about friendship. It was about something deeper, something that scared me and yet called to me at the same time. The next day at school felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of a secret I wasn't ready to share. I tried to act normal, tried to laugh at the same jokes, tried to walk the same hallways with the same confidence, but nothing felt the same. Every time I saw her, my chest tightened. It was as though her eyes knew something about me that I hadn't yet confessed to myself. I sat across from her at lunch, picking at my food, pretending to listen as she spoke, but my mind was racing back to the locker room. The silence between us was louder than the chatter of hundreds of voices around us. I wanted to erase the moment, to go back to when we were just two friends who trusted each other completely. But I couldn't. Because the truth was, I had felt something. And no matter how much I wanted to bury it, it lingered like a shadow I couldn't escape. She didn't push me that day. She acted almost as if nothing had happened, talking about classes and gossiping about the teacher's new haircut. But her voice had an edge to it, soft and careful, like she was measuring every word. When our eyes met, she held my gaze longer than before, and that silence between us spoke louder than anything else. I forced myself to smile, to laugh at the right times, but I could tell she saw through me. She always could. She knew me too well, and that scared me more than anything. I wondered if everyone else could see it too, if the way I avoided her touch, the way my face flushed when she leaned too close, was as obvious as it felt. By the time practice rolled around again, I was on edge. I told myself it was just another day, just another hour of running drills and pretending I wasn't falling apart inside. The gym smelled the same, the voices echoed the same, but I couldn't stop myself from glancing at her every few seconds. She looked calm, almost too calm, as if she had already made peace with what happened. I envied her for that. My body felt like it was carrying a storm, but she seemed untouched by it. When we finally walked into the locker room together, I could feel my pulse quicken. I didn't want a repeat of yesterday, but part of me feared I might not have the strength to resist if it happened again. This time, we weren't alone at first. The sound of showers running and girls laughing filled the space, and I let out a breath of relief. I clung to the safety of that noise, knowing that as long as others were around, nothing could happen. But one by one, they left, until it was only the two of us again. I sat on the bench, staring at my shoes, trying to will myself to be strong, to act normal, to not let my mind wander back to the memory of her fingers brushing against mine. She sat across from me, watching in silence, and I could feel the weight of her gaze. It burned into me, demanding acknowledgement, but I kept my head down. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was soft but steady, the kind of tone that made my heart ache. She said, "I didn't mean to scare you yesterday. I couldn't hide it anymore." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell her it was fine, that I wasn't upset, that we could forget it ever happened. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I knew forgetting wasn't possible. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes searching mine, waiting for something, anything, that would tell her what I was feeling. And that was the problem. I didn't even know what I was feeling. I was terrified of myself, terrified of what it meant if I admitted the truth. That I stood up quickly, pretending to be busy, rummaging through my bag for things I didn't need. I told her we were just kids, that she didn't really mean it, that this was just some phase she would laugh about one day. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. Her face didn't change. She just watched me with that quiet intensity, as if she had been waiting years for this moment and wasn't going to let it slip away. And the worst part was, I couldn't bring myself to walk away from her. Even in my fear, I wanted her near. Even in my confusion, I craved her closeness. It was as though the very thing I was running from was the only thing keeping me alive. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, drowning in thoughts I couldn't share with anyone. I wondered what was wrong with me. Why couldn't I just say no and mean it? Why couldn't I just laugh it off and move on like it never happened? But the truth was, I didn't want to laugh it off. I didn't want to erase the feeling her touch had left on me. I hated myself for wanting it, for replaying it in my mind over and over. Yet no matter how much I tried to silence it, I couldn't. That moment had unlocked something inside me that I couldn't close again. The days that followed became a quiet war inside me. Every glance, every accidental brush of her hand against mine, every word she spoke felt loaded with meaning. I was caught between fear and longing, shame and desire, truth and denial. I knew things couldn't stay the same between us, but I also knew I wasn't ready to face what it all meant. And as much as I tried to pretend otherwise, I could feel the ground beneath us shifting, carrying us both toward something we couldn't avoid. The tension between us grew heavier with each passing day, like an invisible thread pulling us closer while I tried desperately to resist it. I noticed the little things more than ever, the way her laughter seemed softer when it was just for me, the way she lingered near me in the crowded hallways, the way her arm brushed against mine just a second too long. To anyone else, we looked like best friends, inseparable as always. But beneath the surface, there was a current I could no longer ignore. I found myself studying her face when I thought she wasn't looking, memorizing the curve of her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke. It scared me how much I noticed. It scared me more how much I cared. I had spent so long building walls around myself, telling myself that whatever I was feeling wasn't real, that it was just a phase or a mistake. But those walls were starting to crack, and she was the one slipping through the gaps. That it wasn't just in the locker room anymore. It followed me everywhere. At lunch, when our knees touched under the table and neither of us moved away. During class, when I caught her watching me instead of the board, her gaze full of something unspoken. Walking home together, when the silence between us felt heavier than words. She didn't push me, not directly. She didn't force me into conversations I wasn't ready for. But she let her presence do the talking. It was in the way she walked close enough for our shoulders to bump, in the way she held my gaze as if she was waiting for me to finally admit what we both knew. And I hated myself for not being strong enough to stay away. One afternoon, it all became too much. We were sitting under the big oak tree by the field, the place we often went to escape the noise of everyone else. I had my notebook out, pretending to study, but I couldn't focus. She leaned against the tree, watching me with that same quiet intensity, and I felt the heat rise in my chest. Finally, she broke the silence. "You don't have to be afraid of me," she said softly. Her words cut through me like a blade. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but my voice failed me. Because the truth was, I wasn't afraid of her. I was afraid of myself. I was afraid of admitting what her presence stirred inside me, afraid of how it would change everything that I managed to whisper, "You don't understand," but even as I said it, I knew she did. She understood more than I wanted to admit. She reached over and touched my hand lightly, not forcing, not demanding, just offering. The warmth of her skin against mine sent a rush of emotions through me that I could no longer deny. My instinct was to pull away, but I didn't. I let it linger. For the first time, I didn't fight it. My heart raced, my breath shallow, but in that moment I realized how much I had been lying to myself. The way my chest ached when she wasn't near, the way my whole world quieted when she was close, this wasn't something I could ignore forever. That night, when I went home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank page in my journal, trying to write down what I felt. The words wouldn't come. All I managed to scribble was her name, over and over, until the ink blurred from the tears that fell onto the paper. I hated the confusion, hated the fear, but more than anything, I hated the longing. Because I wanted her. Not just as a friend. Not just as a comfort. I wanted her in ways I didn't know how to put into words. And admitting that, even just to myself, broke something open inside me that I couldn't take back. The next day at practice, I felt different. I tried to act the same, but she saw right through me. She always did. When the others left the locker room, I expected her to stay quiet like before. Instead, she looked straight at me and said, "I don't regret what I did." Her voice was steady, sure, while mine trembled as I tried to respond. I told her she was ruining everything, that we couldn't be like this, that people would never understand. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't her I was talking about. It was me. It was my own fear, my own shame, my own unwillingness to let myself feel something that felt too big, too overwhelming. She didn't argue. She just stepped closer, her eyes locked on mine, and whispered, "Then don't let them see. Just be honest with me." Those words haunted me for days. Be honest with me. The simplicity of it terrified me because I realized I had been lying, not to her, but to myself. I told myself I was scared of losing her, scared of the world finding out, scared of being different. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't scared of losing her. I was scared of how much I already needed her. And admitting that, even silently, was the first time I allowed myself to see what this really was, not confusion, not a mistake, but love, raw and undeniable, no matter how much I tried to run from it. The days after her words felt like living in a fog. I carried them with me everywhere, heavy but impossible to shake. Be honest with me. They echoed in my mind every time I looked at her, every time she smiled, every time her hand brushed against mine in those small, fleeting moments that felt louder than anything else in my life. I tried to focus on school, on the routine of classes, practice, and homework, but everything reminded me of her. Even the smallest details, a song playing in the cafeteria, the smell of her shampoo lingering when she walked past, the way her laughter carried across the hallway, pulled me back into the storm inside me. I was unraveling quietly, carrying a secret I didn't know how to name, and the only person who understood it was the one person I was terrified of losing. One evening after practice, when the sun was setting and the hallways were almost empty, she asked me to walk with her. There was no one else around, just the two of us and the fading golden light spilling through the windows. My chest tightened, but I went with her anyway. We walked side by side in silence until we reached the field, where the grass swayed softly in the evening breeze. She sat down first, tugging at the blades of grass, her face unreadable. I hesitated but eventually sat beside her, my body tense, my hands twisting in my lap. For a long time, neither of us spoke. It was the kind of silence that was both unbearable and comforting at the same time. Finally, she broke it. "I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice low and almost trembling. It was the first time I had ever heard her sound uncertain. She was always the strong one, the one who seemed so sure of herself. But in that moment, she was vulnerable, and it broke something inside me that I wanted to tell her that she wouldn't lose me, that nothing could erase the years of friendship we had built, but the words stuck in my throat. Because deep down, I knew everything had already changed. I couldn't pretend that what happened in the locker room hadn't shifted the ground beneath us. I couldn't promise her that things would go back to the way they were, because I didn't want them to. That realization terrified me more than anything. So instead of answering, I just sat there, staring at the horizon, my heart pounding in my chest. She turned to look at me, her eyes soft but searching, and said, "You feel it too, don't you?" I froze. The world seemed to stop in that moment. The truth was written all over my face, even if I didn't say it out loud. My silence was the answer she needed, and I hated myself for not being able to deny it. She reached for my hand again, her touch gentle but certain, and I didn't pull away this time. The warmth of her skin against mine sent a rush of emotions through me that I couldn't contain anymore. For the first time, I let myself feel it. I let myself admit that what I had been running from wasn't fear of her, it was fear of myself, fear of who I was when I was with her. My heart raced, my throat ached, but beneath it all there was a strange sense of peace, like finally breathing after holding it in for too long. That night when I got home, I sat in my room with the lights off, the silence pressing down on me. I thought about the years we had spent together, the laughter, the secrets, the way she had always been there when no one else was. And I realized it wasn't just about what happened in the locker room. This had been building for years, quietly and slowly, until it could no longer be ignored. She wasn't just my best friend. She was the person who knew me better than anyone, the person who made me feel seen in a world that often left me invisible. And maybe that's why it hurt so much, because admitting what I felt for her meant admitting that I had been hiding from myself for too long. The following days were both terrifying and beautiful. Every look, every word, every small touch carried a new meaning, one we both understood but never spoke out loud. It was like living in two worlds at once, the world where we were still best friends, and the hidden world where something deeper was quietly blooming between us. At times, the weight of it crushed me, the fear of what others would say, of what it meant for my family, my future, my identity. But then she would smile at me, that soft, knowing smile, and for a moment, the fear would fade. I found myself wanting more, craving the moments when we were alone, when the silence between us was filled with something unspoken but undeniable. One afternoon, as we lingered in the locker room again after everyone else had left, she stood close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. I could hear the steady rhythm of her breathing, and it was both terrifying and intoxicating. She whispered, almost as if she was afraid of her own words, "You don't have to be afraid with me." And for the first time, I believed her. My walls were crumbling, piece by piece, and though it scared me, I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to stop it. Because beneath the fear, there was something stronger, something that felt like truth. And as much as I wanted to run, I knew I was already too far gone. I started to notice how much I had changed without even realizing it. The way I walked through the hallways felt different, like I was carrying a secret that burned inside me. Every glance, every smile, every touch from her left me in a haze, torn between wanting to scream it out loud and burying it so deep no one could ever find it. She, on the other hand, seemed calmer, almost as though she had already accepted what was happening between us. Her confidence both comforted and frightened me. It felt unfair how she could look at me without hesitation, while I was drowning in my own thoughts, scared of what it all meant. At home, I was more distant than ever. My parents noticed. They asked why I was quieter, why I wasn't eating much, why I locked myself in my room after dinner. I gave them excuses about being tired from schoolwork or stressed about exams, but the truth was, I couldn't let them see the storm inside me. I wasn't ready to face their questions, their disappointment, their judgment. Sometimes I stared at my reflection in the mirror, searching for answers in my own eyes, asking myself who I really was. Was I still the same girl I had always been, or had I become someone new? The thought of being different terrified me, but what scared me more was the possibility that I had finally found who I really was, and it was nothing like what people expected me to be. School became both my escape and my prison. I looked forward to seeing her, to the fleeting moments that felt like ours alone, yet I dreaded the constant fear of being found out. I noticed how people around us talked, the way they teased about who liked who, the casual jokes about relationships. Every laugh made me shrink inside, because if they knew about us, or even suspected, it wouldn't be a joke anymore. It would be a weapon. Still, despite the fear, I couldn't stop seeking her out. I couldn't stop watching her when I thought no one else noticed, couldn't stop the ache in my chest when she brushed past me, leaving the faintest trace of warmth behind. One Friday evening after practice, the world seemed to conspire against my walls. It had been raining, and the halls were nearly empty. She walked me to my locker, her hair damp, her cheeks flushed from the cold. There was something about the way she looked at me that made it impossible to breathe. She didn't say much, just stood there, close enough that I could smell the rain on her clothes. My hands trembled as I grabbed my books, trying to distract myself, but when I closed the locker door, she was right there, inches from me. I froze, trapped between the metal and her steady gaze. She reached up and tucked a wet strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers brushing my skin so gently it almost undid me. "You don't have to hide from me," she whispered. Her words were a mirror to my soul, reflecting the truth I had been avoiding. I wanted to deny it, to pull away, but I couldn't. My body betrayed me, leaning closer instead of stepping back. My heart pounded, my lips parted, and in that suspended moment, the world felt painfully still. Then I did something I never thought I would. I let myself close the distance. That it wasn't a kiss, not really. It was more like a silent confession, the way our foreheads touched for just a second, the way our breaths mingled, shaky and desperate. My eyes stung with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming flood of emotions I could no longer control. She pulled back first, her expression soft, her smile small but certain. "You don't have to say it," she murmured. "I already know." And that broke me in a way nothing else ever had. Because she was right. She knew me better than I knew myself, and that both terrified me and saved me at the same time. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the moment over and over until it was etched into me. The warmth of her hand, the steadiness of her voice, the closeness of her breath. I had crossed a line I told myself I never would, and yet it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt inevitable, like something that had been waiting to happen all along. And even though I was still scared, scared of being judged, scared of losing control, scared of what this meant for the rest of my life, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. I wanted her. I wanted the way she made me feel alive, the way she made me feel seen, the way she made me believe that maybe love wasn't something to fear but something to fight for. In the days that followed, everything became more intense. The way we looked at each other carried weight, meaning, danger. Every stolen moment was sharper, every silence heavier. I found myself living for those moments, addicted to the secret we were building together. But with each passing day, the fear grew too, the sense that we were walking a tightrope where one wrong step could send us crashing down. And yet, even with all that fear, I couldn't bring myself to stop. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was feeling, deeply and completely, even if it scared me half to death. The shift between us was undeniable now, and there was no use pretending it wasn't happening. What began as a moment in the locker room had grown into something that consumed my thoughts day and night. Every time I was near her, my body betrayed me, my heartbeat racing, my palms clammy, my throat tight with words I couldn't bring myself to say. She carried herself differently too, but not in a way that anyone else would notice. To the world, we were still just best friends. To me, though, it felt like we were moving in a dangerous dance, one that only the two of us could feel, where every glance, every brush of her hand, every stolen second was laced with a secret no one else could see. The weight of it was suffocating and yet intoxicating at the same time. At school, the fear of being found out loomed over me constantly. I became hyper-aware of everyone around us, paranoid that someone would notice how close we stood or how my face flushed when she whispered something in my ear. The world around me seemed louder and harsher. Jokes about crushes and teasing about relationships stung more than they used to, because beneath every laugh I heard the threat of exposure. I wondered what they would say if they knew. Would they call us disgusting? Would they tear us apart with their words? Would they treat me like I was broken? I kept all those fears locked inside, smiling and laughing when expected, but inside I was unraveling. She, on the other hand, wasn't afraid in the same way. I could see it in her eyes, the quiet certainty, the calm acceptance of what she felt. That was what made me both love and resent her. She wasn't battling herself like I was. She wasn't hiding from her truth. And sometimes, when her gaze met mine, it felt like she was silently asking me why I couldn't be brave too. I didn't know how to answer her. I wanted to be fearless, but years of being taught what was right and normal had built walls too thick to climb in one step. One evening, after practice, she insisted we stay back a little longer. The gym had already emptied, the sound of bouncing balls and squeaking sneakers fading into silence. We sat on the bleachers, just the two of us, with the dim lights above casting long shadows across the court. I was nervous, my knee bouncing uncontrollably, while she leaned back casually as if she had all the time in the world. After a long pause, she finally said, "Do you ever wonder why we're so scared of what we feel?" Her voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind the question. I swallowed hard, staring at the floor, because I didn't have an answer that made sense. She continued softly, "I don't care what people think. I care about you. That's all I've ever cared about." Those words cut through me, both terrifying and comforting. I wanted to believe them, wanted to let them be enough to quiet my fears, but I couldn't silence the voice in my head that reminded me of everything we stood to lose. I whispered, barely audible, "But what if they hate us?" My chest tightened as the words left my lips. She didn't hesitate. She turned to me, her hand brushing against mine, and said, "Then let them. Because I don't." Her certainty left me speechless. I looked into her eyes, searching for even a flicker of doubt, but there was none. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a world where her words were true, where love wasn't something to hide or be ashamed of, but something worth holding on to no matter the cost. That night when I got home, I lay awake again, but this time the silence felt different. I thought about what she had said, about the way her voice didn't shake, about the way her hand didn't tremble when it touched mine. I wondered how she found that kind of strength, and why it felt so impossible for me. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a spark of hope. Maybe I didn't have to keep running from this. Maybe I didn't have to keep hiding from myself. The thought both terrified and thrilled me, because if I allowed myself to take that step, there would be no turning back. That I and the days that followed, our connection deepened in ways I couldn't deny. It was in the stolen glances across the classroom, in the way she brushed past me in the hallway with a secret smile, in the way we lingered in the locker room long after everyone else had gone. Each moment felt heavier, more dangerous, but also more alive. The fear never fully left me, but it began to share space with something stronger, the quiet, persistent truth that I wanted her. Not just as a friend, not just in the safety of silence, but fully, openly, even if the world wasn't ready to accept it. And though I wasn't ready to say the words out loud, I knew deep down that the truth was already alive between us, growing stronger every single day. It was getting harder to hide what was happening between us. The more time we spent together, the more obvious it became, at least to me. My heart no longer listened to reason when she was near. The smallest things, like the way her fingers brushed mine when she passed me a pen or the way her laugh filled the empty locker room, felt electric. I tried to control my reactions, but it was impossible. I was caught in a storm I couldn't escape, torn between fear of being exposed and the overwhelming need to be near her. She didn't say much about it anymore, but her silence wasn't empty. It was filled with certainty, with patience, with a quiet confidence that only made me want her more. And the truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that she was only my best friend. The whispers around school made me more paranoid. People weren't talking about us specifically, but I heard the jokes, the casual remarks, the cruel laughter aimed at others who didn't fit in. I saw how quickly rumors spread, how easily people turned on one another. It terrified me. I imagined what would happen if they found out about us, about me. Would they laugh? Would they whisper my name with disgust in the hallways? The fear dug its claws deeper into me every day, but so did the longing. The more I tried to push it down, the stronger it became, until I realized I was no longer in control. My heart had already chosen her, and no amount of fear could undo that truth. One late afternoon, we stayed behind after everyone else had left the gym. The sun was setting outside, painting the floor with streaks of gold and orange. We sat on the bench, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and said quietly, "You know, I don't care if the whole world finds out. I don't care what they say. I just don't want to lose you." Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and it startled me because she was always so sure, so steady. For the first time, I saw the fear in her too, and it broke something open inside me that I wanted to tell her that I felt the same, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached out and placed my hand over hers. It was a small gesture, but for me, it felt monumental. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened, and she squeezed my hand in return. We sat like that for a long time, neither of us speaking, but everything being said in the silence. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break free from my chest, but at the same time, I felt an odd calm wash over me. For the first time, I wasn't running. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit, even just through a touch, that I wanted her too. That night, when I was alone in my room, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because of the relief that came with finally letting myself stop pretending. For so long, I had buried the truth under fear and shame, but now it was out, at least between us. And instead of destroying me, it felt like freedom. I thought about the way her hand felt in mine, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, the way she had always seen me even when I tried to hide. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think that maybe this wasn't something wrong. Maybe it was something rare, something worth holding on to, even if the world wasn't ready to understand. Over the next few days, everything felt sharper. Every time we looked at each other across the room, it felt like a secret promise. Every time we walked side by side, our arms brushing, it felt like a confession no one else could hear. The fear didn't vanish, it was still there, lingering in the corners of my mind, but it no longer controlled me the way it once had. Instead, it shared space with something stronger, hope. I started to imagine a future, even if only in small glimpses, where I didn't have to hide, where I could love her openly, where the world's judgment didn't matter as much as the way she made me feel. The truth was, I was falling in love with her, and no matter how much I had fought against it, no matter how much I had denied it, the feeling was unstoppable. It was in the way she looked at me like I was the only person in the world, in the way she never demanded more than I could give, in the way she waited patiently for me to catch up to the truth she had already embraced. And as terrifying as it was, I knew deep down that this was no longer something I could fight. This was who I was. This was us. And it was real. The moment of truth came slowly, not in a sudden explosion but in a quiet unfolding that neither of us could stop. By the time it happened, I realized we had already crossed every invisible line I had once tried to cling to. There was no more denying it, no more running from myself. I had spent weeks battling between fear and desire, shame and hope, but in the end, my heart chose for me. It was late one evening, after practice, when the locker room was silent and the world outside seemed to fade away. We were alone again, the air heavy with the unspoken words that had been building between us. She sat close, her knee brushing against mine, her eyes searching my face with a softness that disarmed me. For once, I didn't look away. I let myself drown in her gaze, and I saw everything there: patience, fear, longing, but most of all, love. It was undeniable, and it was for me that my chest ached as I tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, I reached out and touched her hand, holding it firmly for the first time without hesitation. My voice trembled as I whispered, "I'm scared." She squeezed my hand, her thumb brushing gently against my skin, and answered, "So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Tears filled my eyes because I knew she meant it, every word. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling me. I leaned closer, letting myself close the space between us, and when her lips touched mine, it wasn't rushed or desperate. It was slow, gentle, and filled with all the words we had been too afraid to say. My entire body trembled, but at the same time, I felt a calm I had never known before, like I was finally where I belonged. Afterward, we sat in silence, our hands still intertwined, our hearts still racing. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I closed my eyes, savoring the warmth of her against me. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what others would say or what the world might do if they found out. All I cared about was the girl beside me, the one who had seen me when no one else did, the one who had broken through the walls I thought were unbreakable. I realized then that love isn't about being fearless, it's about choosing someone even when you're scared, about holding on even when the world tells you to let go. In the days that followed, nothing on the outside seemed to change. We still walked the same hallways, still sat side by side in class, still laughed at the same silly jokes. To everyone else, we were just best friends. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Every glance, every touch, every shared silence carried a deeper meaning now. It was ours, a secret world we built between us, fragile yet unshakable. The fear of being judged still lingered, but it no longer consumed me. Because now, when the doubts crept in, I remembered the steadiness in her voice, the certainty in her touch, and the way her lips felt against mine. Those memories became my anchor, reminding me that what we had was real, and no amount of fear could erase it. Home, I still kept it hidden, still locked away the truth behind careful words and practiced smiles. My parents didn't know, and I wasn't ready for them to. The thought of telling them made my stomach twist in knots, but for once, I didn't feel ashamed of myself. I didn't feel broken. Instead, I felt stronger, because I finally understood that love, our love, wasn't wrong. It was simply ours. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And that made it worth everything. One evening, as we sat together under the oak tree where so many of our secrets had been shared, she turned to me and whispered, "No matter what happens, promise me you won't let go." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the quiet plea hidden behind her strength. My throat tightened, but I nodded, gripping her hand tightly. "I promise," I whispered back. And I meant it. Because even though the road ahead was uncertain, Even though the world might never understand, I knew I didn't want to face it without her. That night, lying in bed, I let myself smile in a way I hadn't in a long time. For years, I had been afraid of who I was, afraid of what it would mean if I let myself feel what I truly felt. But now, I wasn't running anymore. I had faced it, and I had found love, not in some perfect, easy story, but in the complicated, messy truth of who I was and who she was to me. And though the future was still unclear, one thing was certain: what happened in that locker room had changed me forever. It wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of one.